Thanks very much. I didn't actually think I'd be standing here. About 3 years ago, I went to a college thing down near the Opera House, and I met Professor John Evans in the room today, and he said, whatever you do, don't do this course, don't do this Master of Risk Management, because, you know, A, your maths isn't good enough, and B, you're going to be with all these kind of tech geeks and you won't understand what's going on, so please just leave now, have a few cut sandwiches and a beer and leave. I disregarded his advice, and here I am talking to a group of actuaries, believe it or not. So no maths questions. So the session today is project risk management. This is about meat and potatoes risk management. It's about working with risk management with people in the industries with a bit of dirt under their fingernails that have been 40 years in industry, who understand conceptually what risk management does, but you have to lead them along a journey. So everything we see today in the presentation is transferable into insurance, into the banking industry, into the finance industry. In fact, into local government, etc., etc., etc. We'll go through that. I'm going to talk about why you guys are the most important people in the room, essentially. And this is what we found in risk management, particularly in manufacturing industries and heavy industries like rail, is that we had the value of the risk professional is fluctuating. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit and probably give you an understanding about why it's our fault that's happening, and where in the organisational design, or organisational redesign, the CRO is now sitting. Okay, the banking industry and the insurance industry certainly helped us there for a while, and we took that lead. But slowly risk management is actually diluting out in the sectors. You can influence strategy, you just don't know it. If there were any risk managers in the room, we didn't call you a risk manager, we called you an uncertainty manager, and went to the board or the CEO or the CFO and said, you know what, I can make your world more certain. I can tell you things about our business that makes our decisions better, and you can be more certain about it, you'd be more valuable. Okay, when we talk about risk, we do have this legacy piece about risk managers, and it was born predominantly in the safety industry, and there is a bit of beggar fatigue about risk management. I'm going to talk about that as well. There is a lack of understanding about how we sell ourselves professionally, about how, if we are the uncertainty managers in industry, how do we actually sell that as a proposition to our business? And what if we change your title from risk manager to uncertainty manager? This is not a safety presentation. Why I say that is because if I go to a different forum today and say I'm going to give you a session on risk, they go, okay, where's your heart at? Let's talk about PPE. It's a safety presentation. It's not. Today is all about bucks. It's all about bucks, and today is about managing risk to win. If we talk about bog standard 31,000, which we will not today, okay, it's about managing the uncertainty or the risk of it, the effect of uncertainty on our objectives. Okay, in my world, these are some of the objectives I try to manage uncertainty in. Right at the moment, I'm caught up in $2.8 billion jobs in Melbourne and Sydney on the rail infrastructure and rail networks. Okay, we have to win those contracts, and if we win them, is it a good one to win or not? I was on Sydney Light Rail, perhaps the best one we ever lost. Actually, we didn't lose it. Our contractor fell out just prior to pens down on that one. So there's a lot of problems under George Street. So it may be the best one we ever didn't win. Okay. So we do these kind of things. Project risk to increase margins and win greater profits. We're going to talk about how, if we manage contingency properly, how we can put contingency back to revenue and how we can make some bucks out of that. Commercial risk to win a competitive advantage over our competitors, particularly in the bid and projects space, where, believe it or not, everybody doesn't do what we do. Everybody doesn't do what you do. You are making an assumption, and we'll talk about assumptions later on. You're making an assumption that everybody's at the same level in this space, and they're not. They're really not. Okay. And of course, operational risk to win the respect of our stakeholders. And when we talk stakeholders, up and downstream, board, CEOs, through to shareholders, etc., etc., etc. We're going to talk about the evolution of risk management now. Okay, so we go back into history. Basically what happened is a lot of shunters were dying on the British rail system in the 50s and 60s. They started to look at enterprise risk management, safety risk management. I know I'm talking very quick, we'll get through this stuff. Okay, and as they were starting, they looked at course consequences. Okay, they're shunting because they're standing in between the two trains. No brainer, don't do that. Put some controls and actions in place, and we started to bring this approach into what we do. Okay, in the financial institutions, of course, with Basel 1, 2, 3 and now 4, we're starting to do different kinds of, we understand where that came from a financial perspective, but the traditional approach is important because as we morphed across industries, we took this linear approach, and we had these risk registers. Yeah, and everybody sat in a risk session. They're really boring, usually a guy with a grey suit and grey pants, three pens, grey socks and zip-up shoes. I haven't seen them for a while, but they do exist. And what we do is we go from top to bottom, and by about risk 3, you say, how can I go to this room? By risk 4, Josh, please ring me about 2 hours, text, get me out of here. And by risk 65, right, we're just running through them because we've gone through this linear approach top to bottom. We don't do that anymore. I'm going to tell you how we do it now, okay? And you just couldn't get out of these things. And every 6 months, we put that away and say, see Jason for the risk session in 6 months' time. We go back and see Jason, that's really boring. Hi, Jason, have a coffee, and we do it again, okay? Red risk, yellow risk, green risk, this kind of stuff. We go back and back and back, okay? And what happened with that is we had this beggar fatigue about risk. And basically people did not want to participate. So how do we make them participate? If you're working on an Excel spreadsheet, going across linear components and talking about things which are really quite qualitative and can't be measured in your world. We're going to talk about how that's changed now. So what we started to work in our industry is things like unique identifiers. We're going to touch on that in a sec. We'll talk about assumptions and how we make assumptions. It's an interesting thing about assumptions. I was once in the homicide squad. On the same day, on the same morning, the same suburb, at the same time, they found a headless body in a bottler's head. And it wasn't the same person, but I made the assumption it was, okay? And we'll talk about assumptions. Only just recently, you might have heard the news recently about the Olympic swimming pool at London. They just measured it's about 16 millimetres too short. So they're starting to, I know. So they're starting to think about whether we have recalibration of those records. And we'll talk about why assumptions are important. If you haven't got evidence, why assumptions can be important when we do a range analysis, particularly in a project sense. So what we have now is we have this contemporary approach where we have risk databases, and essentially, does it look like an Excel spreadsheet? No. Is it? Maybe yes. Okay, but it's the way you can deliver in a contemporary fashion some of the benefits of that database. Right at the moment, we use a database where you're on an iPad. So if I have 22 sites nationally, and I have a professional or a project manager in the field, that he or she can work on that risk profile live, and we can sync it together, and I'm looking at what that person does. Unique identifiers is a really interesting piece. I'm going to talk about that in a sec, and also connectivity of risks. If we think about risks, again, we walk into a risk review, and we're really talking about the headline risks, okay? And then what we do with boards, we do all this work, and we give them a board paper which really just fluffs it all down into a nice thing so they feel comfortable, so it's an assurance piece. What we have to do is kind of merge that together, and that's what we do in the contemporary approach. So let's have a quick masterclass on how we do project and bid risk registers. Basically, when we start, we'll find out what's in this bid, okay, what's in the project, and we'll put these, the key SMEs into different streams. And the reason we do that is because I'm not an expert on anything. I know nothing about HVAC. HVAC's air conditioning systems for trains. Didn't know what a bogey was, okay? And I really don't care about half the stuff that's in the train. I really don't. There's people that do that, been doing it for 40 years, quite grumpy people, but they love it. That's why they're there. And I don't really care what it means. And any industry at all, whether it's trains, planes, automobiles, finance, reinsurance, whatever, there are parts of the business which you don't understand. That's okay. It's cool. Okay, we have an SME, okay, to come back and do that. If I can, I'm going to try and get the words cool and sexy into a risk session at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. If I achieve that, my target met. So all these people are doing different things for our project. Why is commercially in grey, you ask, from the back of the room? Because most of the risks in a bid sense is have a commercial sold within the deed or the contract. So a lot of the early risks we might see in these kind of areas will have a commercial sold. That might be a bid back in a PPP situation or a contractual negotiation in a joint venture arrangement, etc., etc., etc. But most of them can be sold prior to signing the contract, and that's why they will sit in that commercial stream. So in a contemporary sense, that means if we had a unique identifier given to every risk, so let's think of an object. It might be a J screw. We call it a J screw because my name's Jason, starts with J, so it's a screw. Okay. If that screw has always got the same unique identifier, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, that unique identifier stays with that risk or that screw in perpetuity. Why that's important in a project sense is, let's think about that screw for a sec. If we align the the work breakdown structure, WBS, to the product breakdown structure, to the risk breakdown structure, and aligned it, we're going to have some synergy where that screw goes. So if I'm working in 22 sites nationally, which I am, there's a problem with that screw. We'll talk about the screw in a sec. If there's a problem with that screw, in perpetuity, we can see where that screw has caused a problem. Now, I'm going to give you an example about that. So that's why we set it up. And then we go through a bog standard 31,000 process with the difference being the validation sessions. And the validation sessions in the Australian vernacular is the bullshometer. Yeah. So we're making an assumption. We've got a range analysis, and we're starting to test that assumption because I don't know enough about it. Okay. And if I don't know enough about the J-screw, I need to ask the guy who built it or was putting it in the train. What's inside the portfolio? At a high level, what we might see, this looks like an early stage of let's call it Sydney Light Rail, because I probably stole it from there. And it looks like there that if we solve the commercial, technical engineering, compliance, and the community stakeholder risk, we've got half the pie. That's generally what's happened in the early stage of a bid. These kind of graphics are important because you don't see them in a Excel spreadsheet unless you're running different add-ons. But if you have that as a portfolio view, that could be a single project, or that could be your portfolio of risks across your insurance, every branch of your insurance company across Australia. It could be anything. What it really does, it gives a high-level snapshot to the CRO or the risk professional about what's in that packet of risk. Okay. Well, let's talk about the J-screw some more. What if we could design and implement a system that could extract this data? If the J-screw, let's just say somebody's working on this J-screw in Canning Vale in Western Australia, and we keep on getting a stack of hand injuries. I said it wasn't a safety presentation. I'll tell you why it's still not. Okay. So there's a hand injury in Cannington, and we're up at Maryborough, somebody's got a hand injury as well. Okay. So because this J-screw's got a unique identifier, it's popping up it's on our green risk. It's right down the bottom. We never get to it when I go around and do the risk reviews. It's the last risk. We've already people have left the room by then. There's 3 people left. Nobody's talking about it. It's right down the bottom. It only costs 17 cents each, and who cares? Okay. A couple of hand injuries, not life-threatening. So we looked at that J-screw, and what we found is that on 9 of the 22 sites, we had some hand injuries rising up. Had a look at that. What we found, of course, is that it wasn't about the hand injury. The actual screw had a burr on it. Okay, the burr was on because we changed a procurement or a supply chain manufacturer in China who were using a lesser grade steel, and we found out they're actually buying about $1.5 million of these screws per annum. Okay, when they were put into the Brisbane set, people started getting drops of rain on their head, which is, if you're in customer experience world, you'll know that's not good for rail travellers. Okay. Why is it raining on my head? Because the J-screw is falling on top of the spandrel. Don't worry about the spandrel, it's a really geeky thing for once on a train. Okay, but we're getting wet. So here we've got hand injuries, we've got people getting wet in Brisbane. It's all because of the J-screw on top of the train. $1.5 million problem, but nobody's thinking about that because it's down the bottom of the risk register. If it wasn't, okay, if we had a unique identifier assigned to the J-screw, not only could we find out what we're at, it's actually a safety, quality, a regulatory project, a facility and an environmental risk. It's actually a procurement risk. It's a supply chain stuffer. How do we find that in a linear world? We don't. And these are some of the methods we're using now to understand what's in the risk portfolio. Not only that, let's just say each control and action against that risk had they were doing things differently across those 22 sites. If I thought the Maryborough guys were doing it better, all of a sudden there's unique identifiers across the actions and controls against the J-screw. So if they're doing it best in practice, let's just take tick, 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 and take those actions and controls across nationally. Okay, the real trick, of course, is how do we return contingency to revenue? Okay, how do we really put if we're going to say to John, look, you've got this $2.8 billion project. Rail projects currently run between 4 and 7% of revenue is in contingency. That's a lot of money. Do the numbers. I'm going to put that money in John's pocket for the next 17 years to run this contract, and that's his contingency. What we want to do is take some of that money back if we're good at this job, okay, and take it back and give it back into our into revenue. And there's a couple of ways we can do that in a contemporary setting. So understand what the uncertainties are. You have to know what they are. You don't. Okay, that's why you've got SMEs. That's why you have to engage as a risk professional. You don't know what they are in every part of your business. Identifying where they sit, knowing who owns them. We always talk about risk ownership. And it's one of these things, some people go to a risk session and they get say, oh, I don't own that, I don't own that. In the end, you're never a risk owner, unless you've got the authority to do something about the risk, the financial delegation to charge out an action against that risk, and also the influence to manage the risk event. If you haven't got any of those three, you're not the risk owner. If you see yourself on a risk register, go back to work. Today you're on a risk register and you haven't got those three things, then you're not the risk owner. You have to have ownership of the actual risk event to have any chance of owning these things. Discovering what drives them, okay? If we go back to the J-screw example, it wasn't about a hand injury, it was just identified via that process, or it was actually about a procurement issue. Understand what drivers are under your decisions that are made in other parts of the business that you have no control over, that may affect your part of the business. Okay, again, this is an international procurement issue. Estimate the range of exposure. All you guys are pretty good at that. We'll talk about that in a second. Investigating every opportunity to mitigate the exposure. Here's our J-screw in a different sense. So what if I put risk on a page up? Okay, so except for speaking linearly, okay, we tend to think linearly across the line. Here we've got risk on a page, and we've got a unique identifier here. So there's 9661. That'll state the risk in perpetuity. And again, each of these tasks that gets to the discrete risk is given a unique identifier. Okay, some key dates, percentage complete, an owner, okay, and a little complete tab, and of course a number of cause and consequence, or cause and effect. Okay, so basically, if we have this kind of profile against our J-screw, what we can quite clearly see is we've got an owner, a start date, and a due date of the risk event to solve the risk event. And also a percentage complete. This is linked into Outlook, okay? So rather than going around to around all these facilities and giving the big stick and hitting people on the back of their head, if I apply a risk hierarchy to the risk event, 14 days before the risk event's actions are due, an Outlook email will go, automatically link into the system and cause a record in perpetuity. Then 7 days before it goes to that person's boss, and we can escalate and escalate and escalate. What's important here, of course, is if these actions that have been taken by these people against this risk event are working, I can automatically, because they have a unique identifier, play them in across the nation where that risk event might be seen elsewhere. And that's a different way of looking at a linear risk line. Okay, another little probability impact diagram or a heat map. Some of you guys would have seen this, but essentially if we're looking at our portfolio here, what we can see is a black pre-mitigated and white post-mitigated position. That is, what's in my portfolio. Again, in your world, it might be a national snapshot of branches, okay? And your branches are all risk rated, and you might see that we have one branch here in the red area, okay? And in a post-mitigated position, it'll come up in the white, okay? If I change the descriptor here, I won't get a count, I'll actually get the unique identifier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will come up here, and this post-mitigated position might come up here if that was the same risk. So these are some of the tools, of course, we can use to highlight and demonstrate some of the work we do. Again, so what do we do about actual range assessments? In a project sense, we have to make a call on some of these things. Some of the things we know because of the price. So if we're talking about a screw, we know what the screws are worth, we know how many we need. Okay. In a construction civil perspective, it's easier because everything is on size and weights, and it's a bit easier. In our world, it's a little bit different. But we basically generate a 3-point estimate generated by the SMEs. That is, they are telling us what the potential minimum, most likely, and maximum cost is of that product, okay, over the life of contract. Where that becomes difficult, of course, is where it was buying over 17 years, and we can long lead time items or items that may become obsolescent. We have to make an assumption about the pricing if a company goes out of business, or that particular piece of equipment, most usually in train intelligence systems, becomes obsolete and we have to source it elsewhere. So that's quite difficult. And if we go to a lot of detail on each line item to discover what is in that basis of assumptions, or what's forming that 3-point estimate. So up here again, we talk here. This one was about let's have a look. This one was about fluctuations in the wage price. The wage price index against the CPI over 17 years of the Greater Wellington contract. They call them MECAs, we call them EBAs. They have 5 MECAs in the 15 years or 17 years of the contract, and whether there's going to be a fluctuation in the forecast CPI to the wage price index, given the fact that a new player is in the market and the unions might take advantage of the new player in the market and then force their hand to escalate the train driver's salaries. Pretty boring, huh? But these are the kind of things that you have to understand. I don't know anything about wage price indexation. I talk to my SME and we work through these pieces of work and we come to an estimate here. And of course we just apply a minimum, most likely and maximum value, and that forms that single line item. You guys know this stuff, I assume, but basically, so we will then form a project, a simulation. As we see, we've got risk 9457 there. We don't know that, of course, if we're working in isolated Excel spreadsheets. We do if we're working on a database. This one here there's a 10 million upside on this wage price. It could actually flip the other way to a 20 million down. So that's why we have obviously a large spike at the zero. But we won't go into the maths of the stuff. I'm going to talk about that one in a second. We'll get back to what the modelling means. But basically, if we look at the model here, the red line represents the mitigated P80 position. If you don't know it, I'm assuming I won't make any assumptions actually. Made some assumptions before. If somebody says what the P80 is, what we're really talking about is a confidence level. That is, I'm 80% confidence that the money I'm going to put in John's back pocket to manage the contingency through the life of contract will be sufficient to manage those risks. If I say P95, I'm 95% confident. If I say P50, I'm just flipping a coin. Okay. And here we see, again, a long tail, which is quite usual when we have a lot of different variants or scores off the mean. And then, of course, we go straight into a risk sensitivity analysis or a tornado, which really talks about, tells steerco or the executive which of the risks in the portfolio has the greatest effect on the mean. One of the tricks here is, so everybody will ask you, what's the biggest risk? What's the biggest risk? Well, the biggest risk may not be, or what risk is going to cost the most. That's really not what you should be asking. What you really want to understand is, what are the risks with the biggest effect on the mean, and what are the ones with the biggest range? Because they're the ones with the most stuff to do, okay? Assumptions and range, okay? What can we rely on with assumptions? Okay, obviously we can rely on evidence, yeah? We can form a reasonable hypothesis based on a similar or strikingly similar facts, okay? Or we can think about an assumption. We can just make an assumption. If we don't know, it's okay to make an assumption. Don't be worried about making assumptions. You make them every day, okay? Be wary of optimism bias. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Understand the elephant alpha in the room. What does that mean? I'm going to tell you in a sec. And be sober, adult and professional. We're going to talk about that in a second. This is why it's important to challenge, okay? To challenge professionally when you're talking about the risk event, because this is right at the start. If the data is poor, if you're not challenging, we can make a mistake. Okay, so boy walks into a shop, he buys a bat and a ball. The bat costs $1. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. The total price is $110. How much does the ball cost? Anybody quickly? Somebody? Just say the obvious answer. You think and say, oh, actuaries. A boy walks into a shop, he buys a bat and a ball. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. The total price is $1.10. How much is the ball? Thank you. Okay. Why isn't it 10 cents? What's wrong with you? Why are you so scared about that? Have 10 cents up. That answer, of course, is wrong, right? But you know why? You know why this skill is important? Because what if it's not 10 cents? We're talking it's $1.05 and 5 for you guys that are wondering. Okay, $10 more than the ball. Ball's 5 cents. $1.05, $10. If that's not about 10 cents, okay, and if the lady here is the CEO and she has influence over that, and you're making a decision that sounds right, not one of us challenged, okay, because it sounds right, okay, and when you make big money decisions and the variance is quite wide, and the CFO or the CEO says, yeah, that's 10 million, looks like 10 million, I'm doing the maths on, it's 10 million, yeah, no worries, that sounds right, but we didn't challenge, okay. And these are some of the tricks we fall in a project sense, because what if it's not so easy as the 10 cents? What if we are talking about an obsolescent air conditioning system in the Waratah train we might use in the Constellation train? And you're saying, well, this won't actually happen until 2028. Okay, you're the HVAC guy, okay? And we don't challenge, but you have to ask a lot of questions about this 10 cents. The same thing with the 747. Anybody from the aviation industry here? Okay, so how wide is a 747 wingspan? 70 metres? So we go there with a single point estimate in the room. That's not bad, okay? But it doesn't matter how wide it is. It doesn't matter, I'm going to tell you why. If we know it's wider than this room with a confidence level, but it's not as wide as the whole of George Street, we're 100% confident of that range, yeah? Nobody's going to say it's smaller than this room, right? We've all sat on one, we've seen one, okay? Seen pictures. So with 100% confidence, I'm telling you what the actual risk event is. Now we're going to bring those in. When we talk about how wide those bookends were before and how variance on the mean, this is the same process. So now we know with 100% confidence that wingspan, okay, is wider than the room and not as long as George Street with 100% confidence. Then we can start doing some more stuff. We can get some evidence, okay? We can get some evidence. But you have to challenge, right? And it's the way our brain thinks. It's just the way our brain thinks. So there's a pond, right? And every day a lily falls on the pond. and it doubles in size every day until the 48th day the lily's covered in the pond's covered in lilies, you can't see any water. What day was it half covered? 24, of course it was, that's wrong as well. Because our brains are going this way. If our brain went that way, and you said it was 100% covered on day 48, and it doubles in size every day, when's it half covered? 47. Okay, and these are some of the things we have to start thinking about when we start to make assumptions. It's okay to challenge. Not one of you guys challenged me about that bullshit I gave you about the pool. If the Olympic pool was short, okay, you would have read that in the paper, sure. You wouldn't have the challenge. Okay, obviously it was new in the room, it's Monday morning. You have to challenge because we're not experts at everything, we're risk managers. Okay, and you need to ask the questions in a sober, adult environment, and it's okay. And it's okay to get them wrong. I got them both wrong. It was my boss that gave them to me. I felt really embarrassed and stupid, and it was his cause. You know? So, but nobody challenged it. You have to challenge assumptions, and this is a lesson about how our brain works. And if you have an alpha in the room, how you can quite quickly fall into despair with this kind of stuff. So that's what a Monte Carlo looks like. Okay, here's another one. I think this may have been early days in a bid, it looks like. So what we have here, and I'll get the microphone for the other people, what we have here is, with an 80% confidence level, I was going to give John $40.9 million, okay, but with 80% confidence, but post-mitigated, I was going to give him 25. So they're saving the $15 million, and what that really means is that if we do everything that the subject matter experts have said to do against that risk event, and it works, there is a likelihood, with 80% confidence level, that that's your right contingency number. Now, I've never won Risk Manager of the Year, I'm not likely to, okay, but what I say to the executive or the steer co is I can find you a number between the lines. And if I find you a number between the lines, we can return that contingency to revenue. The other way we do that is we apply a risk Gantt or a Gantt chart and align that to the schedule or the program. If I know when a risk event starts and finishes, it's not always in your world, okay? With the exception of if I could play some insurance risks around events and also financial year, but in my world it could be that something happens during a project which cannot happen anymore. Then the contingent amount applied to that risk can be returned to contingency. There's nothing a CRO likes better than say, yeah, I have that back. Because what the project managers like to do, of course, is to keep that for other contingent risks not identified. What you want to do, of course, in contingency burn is make sure that the contingency is burnt against a risk that was identified. If it wasn't, then the risk piece at the start is a fault, or you've underdone or overdone something. One tricky way to do that, of course, is don't tell the project manager the contingency amount and burn up rather than burn down. So a lot of project managers will get a contingency burn down, just flip the chart and start it from zero and just see where you are tracking that way. From bid to bucks, okay, if you're dealing with governments, which we do, okay, so I'm the risk manager for the Waratah train. It's the largest rolling stock PPP in Australia's history. We're doing one at the moment in Melbourne with Public Transport Victoria, got released last week. We're bidding for that one. Governments usually use risk, they run away from it, like the opening scene from a Godzilla movie, yeah? They run away and they don't want to touch it, okay? It's because they want to ensure control over the project, they want to ensure that additional financial support is given to the special purpose vehicle, okay? It's a cost out position, and the tactic of what they employ is early risk allocation. They grab you in a room and they'll say, okay, you've got this contract or you're bidding for this work, and even in the EOI, an expression of interest documents, you'll see them ask you to do a risk allocation, even though you have A, you haven't won the job, B, you're not even a preferred tenderer, and C, you're 3 years away from it. They want you to start talking about risk. I love this stuff. Give it all to me and I'll tell you why, okay? This was, let's just call it Waratah because it is, okay, in 2008, right? And the risk allocation that the government decided to take was the yellow line, okay? And the four companies to the right are down a subcontractor, so it was a kind of a tricky contractual arrangement, but contract, subcontractor, subcontractor, subcontractor. So what you see is the government got an absolute cost out legacy and just tried to play it all out. That's very, very normal. In fact, I'm seeing that more often, okay? I say let's take it all on. If we know that pool, okay? If we knew, right, with any kind of confidence that pool's between 49 and 51 metres, right? And if you know that, okay, take the risk. If you don't know it, you can try and play it back, or if it's outside your control, but if you do know it, you can price it. If you can price it, you can sell it. If you can sell it, you can get it out, and that's contingency back to revenue. It's a sexy, cool thing. I told you I'd get it in. That's the way it really works, yeah? Be careful about when you do risk registers, or if you're doing a risk piece in your business now, where that register goes, because the people, if we're doing the project today and you're my team, or we're doing a risk session today, the risks that we identify today and the actions and controls we play against them, A, none of us will be in the room when the life of contract finishes, okay? B, it'll be given from a project sense up into a headline risk register. It'll be given in submission. It'll go into the transition team, and the poor old project manager gets it 3 years later, okay? And it's a bunch of Excel spreadsheets which have been put in a drawer, and there's your project risk register, off you go, John. That's not the way it happens, okay? So all these risks today are in perpetuity. So we're touching this database all the time, and it's transient. As a transition team, the people in the transition team take the risk register and they mould them after the contractual close and the financial close, and as we move into operations, then the operations manager gets it, and it's all on the database. They actually literally an iPad, yeah? And the only thing they see is this project or this bid, and they work with it across the line. Selling risk, okay. What if you could walk into your boardroom today, or go back to your office after this session and go into the CEO's office and say, you know what, boss, I'm the guy or girl that can make your life more certain. I can actually tell you things about your business you don't know. I can do that by using a contemporary approach, an enterprise-wide system. I'm going to go out and explore what our SMEs are saying in the field. I'm going to allow you to do better decisions, whichever way, whether it's by decision analytics, trees, databases, whatever. I'm going to give you the data that gives you a very high confidence level that you're going to tell me the exact wingspan of that 747 on a single point estimate by the end of the year. And not only that, all the contingent money we're talking about, I'm going to start paying you some money back. In fact, just pay me $1 a year and 5% of what I save you. That's the discussion we can have. It's available in every industry. And when you think of the money we are moving around and wasting in dealing with this stuff, there has to be a single approach. There's a better approach. If you've got a risk manager, if you've got a good one, keep them. Okay, if you've got a great one, go to the last dot point. Use them as a process. This risk champion position, geez, it's hard, because if I just go to somebody and say, you know, you are now the risk champion for this section, that's great. You know, I might even give you a badge. You know, but it doesn't mean anything. If you have champions in your business on any part of the industry, they need to champion it themselves. There needs to be a self-nomination for a position like this, because you need influence. It doesn't have to be, in a hierarchical sense, your leaders or your decision makers or your executive, particularly not your C-suite. What it has to be is it's always people you know. If you think back to your workplace now, there are people in your business that you're going to work with later today that have that's something, that influence, that can move things around the matrix organisation quite swiftly. These are the kind of people who should be risk champions. Bring them into the strategy. So it's rubbish doing any kind of risk unless it's part of your strategy. So you've got to understand what the strategic. If it's Suncorp, you've got to go back to the 14-15 strategy document, look at the objectives, and if the risk is not aligned to that objective, then what are you doing it for? Okay, because you're selling it up that way. When it goes to the C-suite and it's in a fluffy PowerPoint document after all the work, you're selling it that way, but it's got to mean something. It actually can. And if it's not part of your strategy, forget it. It has to be part of the strategy. In our strategy, of course, it's to win the bid or to win the work efficiently. Okay, there's a whole lot of things about not bidding. I've seen one no bid ever in my time. We spoke about culture. Flog them as a USP. So what if you're working with a company that doesn't have a dedicated risk professional? Then flog it. If you're selling something, if you're selling a proposition to another company or a joint venture, and you have a better risk proposition than they do, flog it as a USP, because they don't know. They'll benefit from it. You'll certainly benefit from it. We're working with Adani up north, if they finally ever get that contract, or across in the Pilbara, work with a couple of New Zealand miners. They've got no risk process other than the safety process, so they don't do contingent risk on anything, the supply chain, etc., etc., etc. So we offer that, of course, as a big multinational, not multinational, but a big national company, to give them our risk piece. So we actually sell our risk database for $220 a year license, really, okay? And we give them. So Transport for New South Wales can sit there and watch the risk register on one of our trains move as people are touching it. $220 a year. Great service offering, not much cost. Okay, And these are the kind of things we can offer in Greater Wellington Council, the same thing. Oh, how'd that happen? Well, it's been around for a while. And so these things, these little tricky bits are how we can on-sell the value of what we do. Okay, you're not asking maybe 3 months to sit with you in a white room with black chairs and grey suit and go through this risk register all the time. Use them across the functional business. Use them, get them out from where they are. Organisational design. I challenge you to go back. Probably not from your industries, but in every other industry meeting I speak to about this, go back and see where in the organisational design your risk manager sits. Okay, we followed the banks who were pretty good for a number of years. We put him or her out to the side of the CEO, which gave them autonomy. Bad news, red flag for me is under the CFO, but I see some nods to the heads. Okay, but if your organisational design has reflected the risk manager to be this person when you really think they should be this person, and some of the things I've spoken about today, what are you guys doing? Okay, you need to have an understanding of who this person is and what they are and what they can do for your business. And it's not about knowing everything about insurance or reinsurance or financial markets or capital investment. It's not about any of that. It's about the influence and how you can run the system into the process. Okay? I think that's it, is it? Takeaways. Okay, so the approach is totally transportable. If you think I'm just talking about J-screws, guys, you're kidding yourself. I'm not. I'm talking about your world. Okay, you have a J-screw back in your office somewhere there. Okay, that's a problematic piece which you think is solved one way, but if we actually look behind what's driving these things, it's solved another way. Cross-functionality, not just a sexy, cool risk register. Again, it's applicable. Understand its origin to understand its direction. If you think for 1 second, anybody kind of knows now that you can't engage with another company without swapping your safety management systems as a PCB, under harmonised legislation. I said it all in one sentence, okay? And that 48001, 9001, 14001 are all accredited standards, yeah? 31000 is a no-brainer, okay? Not only is ISO a company in itself, but it'll become a part where you can't. And why wouldn't we do that? I mean, why are we swapping safety management systems and we're not swapping risk management systems or risk management plans? Okay, when you're dealing with a JV or a company, that's the first thing you should be seeing. How do you manage risk? Okay, it'll come. In the very short time now, they'll start to accredit you against 31,000 as well. Any jobs out there for you guys? Yeah, okay, so there's 552 jobs at 9:17 this morning over 200,000, 1,327 over 150, and all that rest of it, you don't want all you actually on 6 figures anyway, so it's okay. Don't undersell what can be achieved. Again, watch organisational design in the PD as well. If you're advertising for one, what are you writing in the PD? You know, who are you going to get from what you're writing? Really be careful about that, because the trick is to just to find the old risk manager's job and put that in the PD and get that away and on the seat and give it to your HR people. Be really careful about what you want this person to do, okay? Because there's some really, really smart cookies out there that can do this stuff. Play the whole 31,000. If you haven't read 31,000, it's really, really boring. And I don't want to sit next to you at the Christmas party, but if you want to read it, but you have to know this is your stuff. So if I'm not the SME on the J screw, 31,000, 31,010, okay, really the how to do it document are the two things you need to read around this space. And create your own risk approach, okay, that influence, make them come to you, make them understand. What if you could tell your branch manager at your national insurance company that, you know what, if you manage the contingent risk in this part of your business, that's linked to your KPI or a short-term incentive or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not only that, you can share it with your staff if you manage this, or there are ways to influence without the coin. It might be on a safe perspective, it might be all kinds of different incentives about actually keeping that branch open for a start. But make sure they come to you, and they will come to you if you can sell it the right way. And that'll do me. I think we're on time, Lee. Got some questions?
Thanks very much, Jason.
Okay.
Might as well just stay there. We'll go to some questions. Like a great project manager, you've finished literally bang on time.
There you go.
Congratulations today. We've got some people in Melbourne, so some of those questions should be coming through hopefully over the coming minutes. So please feel free to really provide those questions and they'll be brought up to the front here. Perhaps just while people are thinking of some questions, I'll kick off with one. When you do ask a question, please feel free to state your name and your place of work and wait for the microphone as well, so people online can hear where you're from. So one question I had, Jason, was complexity and the size and scale of the projects. And is a big project just a bigger, do you manage big projects in the same way as you manage small projects? Is there a tipping point across which you need to start thinking about risk and uncertainty for small versus large projects?
There is. I mean, particularly the PPP, we're doing an unincorporated JV at the moment, and we do JVs all over the place. Down as like an octopus with 8 tentacles, we do road resurfacing. We've got poles and wires. Last year we bought Tenex. We large tyre monitoring, all kinds of different kind of complex stuff, obviously mining infrastructure, rail. Keola's down in Michelle, who replenish road surface. So there are quite complex ones. Where we see, where we're getting closer to, if I've morphed in any way, it's closer to the financial modelling. So the trick for us in big bids and projects is to, if we've got the actuaries working on a financial model in our team, we're up for it. Most of the risk to us is in abatements and performance, that is, reliability and availability. So the trains have to be available and they have to be reliable. Okay, they've got 4 wheels, or how many wheels they've got. Okay, not only that, they've got to be on time, they've got to be clean. There's a whole lot of penalties or abatements applied to the rail industry to have these things on track. Now, the trick is, of course, do we embed the contingency in the financial model? That is, we put a range analysis around each of those contingent matters, and we do have these really geeky people who draw worms all over the thing. These are timetables, believe it or not, and they can model when in 17th century Spain a train was late by 2 minutes, or and they do all that kind of stuff. So the trick for us in complexity is really where that arbitration finishes between my contingent piece and what the financial models are modelling, and whether there's any overlay. And the other part of course, is this whole play now about this really, really intricate piece about playing the work breakdown structure into the RBS. That is, every single component down to the J screw. So you break it into the train, 8 cars. Then you break it into subsystems, then you break the subsystems down, then you get right down to the bottom of the components. You actually layer the risk level in there. That's when it gets really difficult. And to be quite honest, in a bid and project sense, you have to sometimes circumvent some of the complexity to get a number on the table. Because again, my number will be a range. So I'll be going to, in 3 weeks' time, we're pens down on Sydney. I'll be going to the boss and saying, look, the range is between here and here. That's the swimming pool, yeah? We want it here. Between the red and the green line, you can pick a number. The tricky thing with complexity, if that number's within the financial model contingency, because I'll always pick a number, yeah? If it's within there, we're fine. It's when we're outside. If I say if it's X and they're saying it's N, and there's a problem either side of their model, that's where we get tricky. That's the most complexity. But under a certain threshold, we wouldn't take it to that level. Okay, we can pick. We've done this for 100 and zillion years, yeah, and you guys have done your work, so we know what's in this stuff. So if the project isn't complex, if we're not in the Pilbara, if we're not, if we're just in our facility doing our work that we've done all the time, we've got another project worth $10 million and it's to retrofit, the Rocky Tilt train, and we've done that train before, then we'll just apply a number to it. Yep.
Great, thanks. Questions, Colin?
Elaine Collins, I'm on the board of Zurich Insurance and the RPC, and I was very interested in your comment around linking risk and strategy, because in my experience I've noticed, I've been a consultant for many years before that, companies put strategy over here, risk appetite over here, and risk management over here, rather than linking them all together. Because I've always thought a strategy should be a combination of pursuit of profit and managing the risks that go around that. So I'm interested in your comment on that.
Yeah, so thanks for being my guinea pig too for my questions. Somebody's got to do it. So I think particularly at Downer, Grant Fenners is a particular good example of somebody who will keep on directing the board into risk and strategy, and why we're doing a risk piece, and the structure of risk management at this business is such that it's aligned to the corporate strategy. It's a little bit, it can dilute as we go down into the divisions because they each have their own strategy. But what I've found with boards particularly is it's kind of, and in the future, kind of every board wants a risk guy or girl, yeah? So it's one of those things where they're starting to understand the value, the money value in managing risk correctly. And if you just keep on banging it back to the bottom line, I think that's the message for boards. And it doesn't have to be about the damn J screw. It can be about efficiencies. It can be around recruitment. It can be about wage rates. It can be about a whole lot of different things. It can be about brand and brand positioning. It can be about a whole lot of things. And if you have any of those subjects, which every one of you guys has today in your business, And these are the things that the boards are discussing about how placement and forecasting where you might position in the marketplace in 3, 5 and 10. These are the kind of things I'd say, well, why not play a uncertainty? Don't call the risk manager in, call the uncertainty manager in and say, how can you make this, what process do you have that can make this board feel assured that that pool's between 49 and 51 metres? And that's what we've got to get back to. Every single time, think about the pool. Yes?
Hi, it's Sid from NAB. My question is around risk culture or embedding that within an organisation. So it's a lot easier said than done in different environments, responded differently. So my question is, how have you seen that you can efficiently embed a risk culture inside people think about risk? Because it's fine to have a linear, approach or a connected approach, but if you have these great tools available that people aren't utilising them, then how do you take that challenge?
So I'm not going to lie to you, it's difficult. I think we've gone with tone from the top. I think we all get tone from the top, and tone from the top sounds great, but fundamentally the practitioners don't get it. So it's kind of tone from the middle on this piece. I think there's got to be a value applied to the process. And if I keep on going back to this, I'm not saying that we should apply a KPI to a project manager and say, if you say that X amount contingency, you can put a 10% in your back pocket. Well, that might work. It's not always the PM's fault about where that thing goes, so the culture. But again, to my point about champions, if you could sell this piece differently, this is what the message is today, really. It's right to your question, mate, is that if you sell it differently, what does it mean? If you go back and never talk about the risk guy again, just call them the uncertainty guys coming, okay? Everybody wants to be more certain, particularly in your industry, and you've got a whole lot of tools that are fundamentally correct, and you've been doing it for many, many years, and you're very profitable in doing it. But there's still some stuff there that we don't do. And risk culture, it works well. We've got beggar fatigue in safety. If we have another toolbox talk, I'll pull what's left of my red mullet out, okay? It drives me crazy. And what we see in the toolbox talk arena about risk, about safety culture, is that people just want to get out of the toolbox talk. I went to a toolbox talk, we have to have a safety moment every meeting. And they get to the point where some guy at the meeting 2 weeks ago and says, I took my fridge to the tip on Saturday and I forgot to tie it on. I said, well, A, you're an idiot, right? I didn't say that. But A, you're an idiot. And this is where we've gone to with the safety talk. And the safety talk was born in what's dangerous about my workspace and how can and I need to tell you about that wet floor over there, And what's happened, we've got this beggar fatigue now is people are starting to kind of invent things about it. So stop, don't do it, the safety talk, and keep that culture alive by making it purposeful and meaningful. Don't do it every day. And I just guess you can't, if you start bashing the table with it, you'll lose them. Tone from the top. I'm not sure how it's a very glossy top, it's like a bauble, just smash it. Okay? I think it's got to come from key influences. And you know who they are. I guarantee if you go back, don't look at the org chart, just go around the office, you know who those key influences are. That person will make a good risk manager.
The recent BHP disaster with the mine and the dam, is that a failure of risk process? And could you comment?
Yeah, so we're James reasoning, Swiss cheesing, kind of, look, again, a safety piece. It's really hard to kind of comment. We lost three, there's three in Western Australia last week, and one of them was a downer employee, a subcontractor, aluminium smelter. What we find if we do a root cause analysis on some of these things is that fundamentally, again, when we put controls and actions against anything, they are discretionary. Okay, unless you get caught out. Any of you guys try to get on the mine side, it takes you a week to get on the side. After induction, it's a very difficult thing. These guys are really, really safe. We've got that added complexity, of course, of being an international mine and whether the standards there are different than Australian standards. I certainly know that in our mines, we basically will not work. We've pulled people out of dangerous situations as a subcontractor, one of mining's biggest subcontractors. But it's a fundamental failure. I think when the root cause, I've done a bit of work on mine disasters through UNSW as part of my course, but what a lot of the data is saying that fundamentally there's a human error and another catastrophic event that's occurred. But it's quite difficult to understand until we find out where it is. If it's a failure in risk, it's a failure in humans, but risk fails every day. we've only just gone through plenty of examples in the financial world about risk failing and poor decision making in relation to financial investment or et cetera, et cetera. So it's a real hard one to, but thanks for the question. I'm not sure I answered it.
Mike Fulton, thanks, that's very interesting.
Thank you.
You touched briefly on a couple of things. I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit more on the validation process. And so I'm wondering, how does that process work, and who do you get your best insight from in those conversations?
Yeah, good answer. Okay, so this is, again, I kind of get from that accent that you might not understand the bullshometer. Okay, the bullshometer is in the Australian vernacular is testing the assumptions. So what we do, okay, so nobody's measured the pool, unless you're a really geeky person. You can put your hand up and you say you've actually run a tape measure on the pool. Okay, nobody's measured. We're making an assumption based on Channel 9. 2 laps is 100 metres, and they get a gold medal. So we're kind of calling it 50. Yeah. When we validate things, we'll have if we use the wage price index CPI issue I had in New Zealand. I thought Mecca was a cosmetics brand. I didn't know what Mecca was, but I had to understand first what the enterprise arrangement was. So basically, you have to start investigating the assumption. And when somebody says when the validation occurs, it's really having that sober conversation and say, look, I don't understand what you're saying about the wage price. Tell me about how many times the union has gone out in the last 9 years. In your last time, not once. Okay. So if they haven't gone out once in the last 9 years, what makes you think they will go out in the next 15? Oh, because Downer are now joining with Greater Wellington, and now you're a new company, and the unions might take that opportunity, okay, in the train and bus union, to bring the bus drivers up to the same rate as train drivers. Good answer, okay? Can you show me where they've done it before? Well, actually, over at Auckland they did that, okay? And they did it by using this part of the industrial law. Fantastic. So now we start to get some evidence to form the assumption. And what I keep doing is just keep tweaking it and tweaking it. And we have in a bid or a project sense, we have a bronze, silver and gold reviews. And these are the catalyst events where they start asking you to apply the bullshometer and get the range in as tight as you can. And what you can see when we run a tornado, of course, is it's only those ones with the wide range. The rest are drinking money. Okay, the rest are if there's no variance in the range, then you're pretty close. We can always be wrong, but that's the nature of uncertainty. And the other way of doing it is you can just literally pad it out. So if you think right at the end you say, I just don't know, and if you're within the threshold, then you can pad it out. What if go back to, if we're talking about this subject, go back to when we had the 40 million, the red line. What if I could price the red line in the contract value and it was palatable to the customer? That is, this is the whole list of 100 risks. We've put a 3-point estimate across the whole lot, and the red line, the 40 million number, is palatable, and we can sell it into the bid. That means that every cent we save off the red line to the green is gettable, okay? Because if that number's palatable and saleable, right, and that becomes a strictly commercial decision, but if that's palatable, then you're in a very good position because any movement to the left towards the green is money back, okay? So that's when a board might take an appetite position, have a think about who your competitors are and how hard they're going to go in, and you might say, you know what, we'll actually take that number in and sell that number as contingents and contingency, and we'll see how we go.
Maybe one final question for Brett.
Thanks.
Very well, thank you for some very practical insights. I was wondering if you could share maybe 1 or 2 key lessons from the Waratah project.
Oh, God. Oh, the Downer guy on the Waratah project. So, look, we wrote down 400 million on Waratah. It's interesting because I wasn't there. I'll put my hand up. I've only been there for 3.5 years, or 3 years, I think. But we do Waratah's lessons learned all the time, and even when we go into new bids, and we actually see it as a double-edged sword. We actually see it as a unique selling proposition, the fact that we've gone through Waratah and we turned it around and flipped it back. Okay, did we write down 400 mil? Yeah, we wrote down 400 mil. Fundamentally, I think that the complexity of the build in China and the relationship wasn't as mature as it may have been there. The logistics and delivery model, and I think design. I think these things, I'm not a train guy, but designing these things is very complex, and what you design on a piece of paper or a CAD drawing can be fundamentally different to what's delivered. There was some quality and rework issues, I believe, that landed products. So you have a product just comes off a ship, yeah, and it's supposed to work, and in some occasions it didn't. There was some rework there, which of course Down took the hit on, and of course programming and scheduling. I think a lot of these things are really mature. For us, what I've done in my business is I've got a little acronym, WLL, Waratah's Lesson Learned, and if I see, I've got a whole pool of these risks that stay in perpetuity, again. So I actually, if I look at a J screw, and that was part of the Waratah, it'll come up WLL, I know it was part of the Waratah project, and I've got to do something. What do we do about that J screw back in there? And it might not be the J screw, it might be something else. We're selling into a new bid. And I'll automatically look back at the Waratah piece, and I'll say, okay, what did Brett do about it back then? And that's the way we kind of learn those lessons. Right at the moment, we think we actually think there's nobody else in the world with our experience, okay, at landing Chinese rolling stock into Australia. Nobody. In fact, we're the only ones that have ever done it. So that's a fantastic proposition for us moving forward.
All right, well, I think we're out of time. So thank you, Jason. Can I ask you to put your hands together and give